Namaste aspirants. Welcome to Prime Time by CivicCentre IAS, the current affairs show of week 12 of subject Science and Technology and Environment and Ecology using 10 plus years of UPSC reverse engineering, PYQ mastery and real-time current affairs tracking from PIB, Hindu, Down to Earth, ISRO, WHO and all other sources filtered for you. These are the hand-picked 5 high weightage topics plus one topic of bonus importance. The 5 topics are Tropical Forest Forever Facility, DNA, HIV, Aditya L1 Mission, Khangchendzonga National Park, and the topic of importance is climate disasters. So let's start with the first topic of the week, which is Tropical Forest Forever Facilities. India said global climate ambitions remains inadequate even a decade after Paris Agreement because as it joined Brazil's new global fund for tropical forests as an observer and also called for the developing nations to accelerate emission cuts and deliver promised climate finance. First of all, what is this tropical forest? Tropical forests are dense evergreen forests that are located near equator, which are characterized by high biodiversity, high rainfall and humidity, multi-layered vegetation structure. These also include tropical rainforests like Amazon, Congo Basin, also the tropical moist deciduous forests and mangroves. What is the significance of these tropical forests? Why are they very important? Because they act like a carbon sink as they store 250 billion tons of carbon which slows global warming. It is also home to more than 50% of the global species. They drive rainfall cycles and also maintain hydrological balance. They play a crucial role in soil and water conservation. They prevent soil erosion, also floods and drought conditions. They support 1 billion people, which also include the indigenous communities. These forests promote pollination, nutrient cycling like carbon nutrient, nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium, as well as the medicinal resources. Why was this tropical forest forever facility launched? It was launched to incentivize the conservation of the old growth tropical forests and also to fix the previous market failure of dead forests, which are currently more valuable than the living forests. In fact, living forests have to be more valuable than the dead forests, but it is reversed in the present case. To reduce the global deforestation that is driven by agriculture, logging, and mining activities, to create long-term, self-sustaining, global south-led conservation finance model and to reward countries that maintain forest cover using transparent satellite monitoring. What is this Tropical Forest Forever Facility? This is a Brazil-led global fund launched at COP30 Brazil. What does it aim? It aims to mobilize 125 billion US dollars, out of which $25 billion are from wealthy governments and philanthropists and $100 billion are from private investors. The returns from these investments will reward developing countries to protect forests. Who all are eligible? There are up to 74 tropical forest countries that have more than 1 billion hectares of moist broadleaf forests. So the eligibility criteria are: the annual deforestation rate shall be less than 0.5% and must not increase after joining. The deforestation rate, though it is less than 0.5, year on year it shall decrease but never increase. It shall have transparent, auditable monitoring systems which are satellite based. There shall be equitable benefit sharing with indigenous people and local communities of at least 20% of the funds. The agreement to TFFF Charter, that is Tropical Forest Forever Facility Charter, is transparency, accountability and compliance. High income countries and regions with monoculture forests are not at all eligible for this particular fund. How will the TFFF work? It acts as a permanent self-financing investment fund. It invests in diversified profiles which include government and corporate bonds. Annual returns are paid to countries based on forest cover that has been maintained, forest cover which is increased, and the forest restoration efforts. The monitoring is remote sensing based, which reduces disputes and ensures transparency. What are the primary differences between tropical forest forever facility and other mechanisms like REDD+? So the leadership. In tropical forest forever facility, it is led by Brazil, that is global south, whereas other mechanisms are mostly donor led, which are mostly with global north. The funding model. Here it is investment driven and self-financing, whereas in other mechanisms it is grant based and donor dependent. The payments are mostly performance based and long term, but in other mechanisms they are often short term and project based investments. The focus in tropical forest forever facility is in maintaining existing old growth forests, whereas in other mechanisms they are mostly with respect to reducing emissions from deforestation. In TFFFF, the stability is vulnerable because of the market volatility. But in other mechanisms, they are more stable, but it has a very limited scale. What are the concerns associated with this tropical forest forever facility? There is a high financial market risk because the returns may collapse, especially during the seasons of recessions like in 2008 crisis or COVID-19 crisis, which threatens the payout guarantees. It may dilute climate finance obligations as TFFF is outside UNFCCC. Developed countries may use it as an excuse to avoid their formal commitments. Monitoring and compliance. Ensuring accurate deforestation data across 70 plus countries is always a challenging task. The concerns of equity, that is, the benefit sharing for indigenous peoples and local communities, cannot be ensured. There will be over reliance on investment returns, that is, it may affect long term continuity, potentially because of the volatility. What is the status of India in this TFFF? India has recently joined as an observer status. India also welcomed Brazil's initiative and emphasized for the need for higher mitigation and ambition by developed countries, as well as it also emphasized on the importance of adaptation and local climate resilience and stressed upon the need for increased climate finance. Why is this TFFF important for global climate action? Because using this TFFF, we can protect more than 1 billion hectares of tropical forests. We can recognize forests as critical climate assets, but not just carbon sinks. Presently, the forests are considered only as a carbon sinks. This also strengthens the global South leadership in climate governance and also helps shift global finance towards nature positive investments. The next topic is DNA. Why is it recently in news? It was in news recently because the double helical structure of DNA, which was discovered in 1953 by James Watson and Francis Crick, who used X-ray diffraction data, and recently James Watson had died at the age of 97. What is this DNA? That is deoxyribonucleic acid. DNA is a large double-stranded molecule which carries the genetic material of every living organism and even viruses. It determines physical traits, biological functions, heredity, and the disease susceptibility of an organism. So each DNA is made up of sugar, which is deoxyribose, phosphate backbone, and 4 nitrogen bases: adenine, thymine, cytosine, and guanine. As per the base pairing rules, Adenine and thymine are based together and cytosine and guanine are based together. There are 4 different types of DNA. The first type is aDNA, which is a right-handed helix structure. It is generally seen in dehydrated conditions and is more compact than the bDNA. The bDNA is the most common form of DNA. It is also a right-handed helix which exists in psychological conditions. This is a classical Watson-Crick DNA. This zDNA. This is a left-handed helix. It has a zigzag backbone and it occurs in high salt environments. Next, we have a mitochondrial DNA. This is a circular DNA which is inherited maternally. This is very crucial for the evolutionary studies. These are the 4 different types of DNA. How does a DNA function? It stores genetic information. That is, genetic information is generally coded in the form of bases. The sequences of the bases which are A, T, C and G. Before cell division, this DNA is created through identical copies because of this base pairing. So the same DNA identical copy has been previously created because of the cell division. Next, the DNA is transcribed and translated using RNA and protein structures. These proteins form enzymes, hormones and cellular structures. The hereditary genes are transmitted from parents to offspring with occasional mutations which can be seen in many persons, and these mutations form the basis of evolution. So how is this DNA used or DNA analysis? DNA analysis is basically a laboratory technique that is used to study the genetic material. It is used in forensics. Whenever there is any crime scene, the analysis of crime scene is done using the DNA connected and also the paternity tests. The paternity test to confirm the parentage of a particular child or the brotherhoods and the other things are found using the DNA analysis. Medical diagnostics. Many genetic disorders are identified using the DNA techniques and they also give cancer markers. There are certain cancer marker cells in a DNA that has high risk of cancers. Agriculture. In agriculture, genetically modified crops can be created to sustain the pest attacks. Hence, by modifying the DNA, we can develop the GM crops. In anthropology, we can trace the ancestry and the evolution of humans. In the conservation biology, the species identification can be identified using the DNA and then they can be conserved. What are the implications for modern genetic technologies like CRISPR-Cas9 technology? First, there shall be understanding of the DNA structures, which also is the main important foundation for the genetic manipulation. So, how is DNA double helix enabled CRISPR and modern genomics is done? First, we shall have knowledge of the base pairing. Hence, with that knowledge, we can edit a specific sequence. Say suppose we want an A instead of a T. So we can use T instead of A so that it gets replicated. Next, we shall understand the replication and the repair process, which is genome editing. Then, the genes shall be mapped correctly, especially for disease therapies. For example, we have many chromosomal disorders or genetic disorders like Parkinson's disease, which can be treated using this CRISPR-Cas9 technology. So what are the applications of this DNA? CRISPR gene editing in humans. CRISPR gene editing, it cures genetic diseases and also can improve the agriculture. Gene therapy, personalized medicines. Certain medicines right now is being taken care using DNA. So a specific medicine is created based on the DNA of the given person. We can also use it for synthetic biology and genomic study and bioinformations. The next topic is HIV. Indian researchers found that broadly neutralizing antibodies, B and ABS, the leading candidates for HIV prevention, do not equally work against HIV strains from different regions. In fact, HIV 1 clade C strain in India is genetically different from African clade C strains. Hence, in India, the BNAB effectiveness is practically reduced. Hence, this particular research highlights the need for region-specific HIV vaccines and India-specific trials. What is this HIV? Human immunodeficiency virus. It is a retrovirus that attacks CD4 T cells, which are immune cells. When these CD4 levels fall dangerously, that causes AIDS. How is it transmitted? It is transmitted through the unprotected sex, sharing needles, blood transfusions from mother to child. How the HIV works? HIV first enters CD4 cells. It first converts the RNA to DNA via reverse transcriptase. Next, it integrates into human genome. It rapidly replicates and millions of variants are immediately created. Then it destroys immunity progressively, immunity of a person. Once the immunity has been drastically reduced, he or she can have many particular diseases because their immunity has been suppressed. Why HIV vaccine is difficult? HIV vaccine is very difficult because there is high rapid mutation in the virus. The glycan shield hides the viral proteins. HIV has different variants or the diverse clades. In fact, the virus it hides in latent reservoirs. What are these BNABs? They are neutralizing antibodies capable of blocking multiple HIV variants. Unlike any particular vaccine, these BNBs are lab made and then injected into a person. Currently, the global trials for prevention is being done. The study also shows that geographic origin of virus changes the BNAB's performance. What are the key findings in this particular study? The Indian HIV clade C strains have distinct genomic patterns. It shows different neutralization susceptibility. In fact, up to 11% of participants had pre-treatment drug resistance also. And BNABs must be region specific for optimal results. The global HIV facts. The most common variant worldwide is HIV-1 clade C. In fact, 50% of the global infections are caused by this clade C variant. This clade C variant is major hotspot in Africa and India. What are the implications for India? There shall be need for India-focused HIV vaccine development. The clinical trials shall also include the Indian viral strains. The BNABs plus ART shall together encounter emerging drug resistance. This can strengthen the case for precision public health. The next topic in news is Aditya L1 Mission. Why is this Aditya L1 mission currently in news? In fact, the visible emission line coronagraph, which is a payload or onboard of Aditya L1, had made first visible light spectroscopic observation of the coronal mass ejection that has been lifted off from Sun. This allowed direct estimation of the crucial CME parameters, which include electron density, its mass, temperature, speed and energy nearer to the Sun than ever before. What it has been achieved? It is a first ever visible light spectroscopic coronal mass ejection observed. The observations are taken very close to the Sun's surface. There is a continuous 24/7 monitoring that has been enabled at L1. The parameters estimated are electron density is around 370 million electrons per cc. The mass is around 270 million tons. The coronal mass ejections had a speed of about 264 kilometers per second. The temperature here is around 1.8 million kelvins. The energy is 9.4 into 10 to the power of 21 joules, which is 100 million times the energy of the Hiroshima bomb. Does this coronal mass ejections really matters? Yes, this matters because these measurements were at larger distance. Earlier measurements which have been taken are at very large distance from the sun. Presently, it is a step closer to the sun. So the near sun spectrometry helps understand the origin of CME and the mass and energy losses from the sun, also the space weather forecasting. So what is this Aditya L1 mission? In fact, the Aditya L1 mission is India's first solar mission, which was launched in 2003 by PSLV C57. The orbit of this Aditya L1 is in a halo orbit around L1, which is 1.5 million kilometers away from Sun, which has a mission life of around 5 years. Why specifically L1 has been selected for this particular project? The Langley points are considered where gravity of Sun and Earth balances the centripetal force. Hence, the spacecraft stays stable in these points. The L1 point provides the uninterrupted view of the Sun. Hence, it also reduces the fuel consumption. What are the objectives of Aditya L1? To study the coronal heating, understand solar wind acceleration, observe solar flares and coronal mass ejections, to map space weather. There are different payloads. In fact, there are 7 payloads on Aditya L1. First is visible emission line coronagraph. This is specifically used to study the coronal mass ejections. The solar ultraviolet imaging telescope. This is used to take pictures of UV based pictures. The solar low energy X-ray spectrometer and high energy L1 orbiting X-ray spectrometer. They are used to study the X-ray rays emitted from the sun. The Aditya Solar Wind Particle Experiment and the Plasma Analyzer package for Aditya. They are used to study the plasma particles, and the magnetometer is used to study the magnetic materials and the magnetic impact because of the sun. What are these coronal mass ejections? They are huge expulsions of plasma and the magnetic fields from the sun's corona. What can they trigger? They can trigger many geomagnetic storms in Earth and auroras, satellite disruptions, and the power grid failures, which can large-scale affect the Indian population as well as the world.
Hello everyone. As you all know, Civil Services Prime Time is one of its kind initiative where we are teaching the students current affairs related to that particular subject one day at a time. అంటే ఒక వారంలో జరిగిన కరెంట్ అఫైర్స్ అన్ని ఒక సబ్జెక్ట్ కి సంబంధించి మేము ఒక రోజులో చెప్తున్నాం. సో దిస్ ఈజ్ ఆల్ బికాస్ ఆఫ్ ద రివర్స్ ఇంజనీరింగ్ టెక్నిక్. బికాస్ మీరు ప్రతి వీడియో చూసినట్టయితే ఎండ్ లో ప్రీవియస్ ఇయర్ క్వశ్చన్స్ ప్రిలిమ్స్ చేస్తున్నాము, అలాగే ఒక క్వశ్చన్ మెయిన్స్ చేస్తాం. సో in order to get daily updates at 7 o'clock sharp as we are doing it, subscribe చేసుకోండి, అలాగే bell కూడా click చేయండి, so that 7 o'clock కి మీకు immediate గా notification వస్తుంది.
The next topic in news is Khangchendzonga National Park. The IUCN, International Union for Conservation of Nature, in the World Heritage Outlook 2025 has rated Khangchendzonga National Park as good, making it India's only natural World Heritage Site with a positive conservation status. It reflects the strong protection, intact biodiversity, and successful integration of cultural and ecological conservation. What is this IUCN World Heritage Outlook? It is a global assessment of all the 252 natural World Heritage sites in the world. It ranks them as good with some concerns, significant concern, and critical. It evaluates any biodiversity health, management effectiveness, and climate resilience. What is this Khangchendzonga National Park and where is it located? It is located in north and west of Sikkim, area covering of around 1784 square kilometers, which is 40% of Sikkim's area. In 1977, it has been declared as a national park, and in 2016, UNESCO has declared it as a World Heritage Site. This is India's first and right now only mixed heritage site, that is both natural as well as cultural. This site is located on Indo-Nepal border. It is named after the Mount Khangchendzonga, which is world's third highest peak. Coming to the geographical altitudinal range of this particular region. This region is around 1,220 meters to 8,586 meters above sea level, where over there are 7 kilometers of vertical sweep, which is one of the world's highest sweep. There are around 280 plus glaciers, including the Zemu Glacier, which is one of the Asia's largest glaciers. It has around 70 plus glacial lakes. The biomes in this particular region include subtropical, temperate, alpine, and permanent snowfields. This lies in Himalayan biodiversity hotspot and contains one of the most extensive Krumholz zones, that is stunted tree-lined forests. What are the highlights of the biodiversity in this particular region? The flagship species of this particular region are snow leopards, red panda, clouded leopard, Himalayan thar, blue sheep, and musk deer. There are around 6 cat species which are rare presently. It also consists of around 550 plus bird life species. The region has around one third of India's flowering plants and have a high diversity of rhododendrons, orchids, and wild trees. This particular region also has one of the highest mammal diversities in Central Asian mountains. Coming to the cultural and spiritual significance of this particular area. As previously said, Khangchendzonga National Park is a mixed site which has culture as well as natural sites. So coming to the cultural importance of this particular area, this is a sacred landscape revered by the Lepcha community and as well as Tibetan Buddhists. This is associated with Padmasambhava, the Guru Rinpoche of Buddhism, and it also is mentioned in Tibetan Buddhist texts of 17th century. The ritual practices observed are Naisol and Pang Labosol. Pang Labosol is the worship of the Mount Khangchendzonga. There is a blend of pre-Buddhist and Buddhist traditions, which is core to the identity of Sikkim. Why the Khangchendzonga National Park received a good rating? It has received because of its intact ecological integrity, the strong legal protection, successful cultural and ecological conservation, rich biodiversity with minimal disturbance, and active community participation. The next topic, which is one of the most important topic of this week, that is climate disasters. The Climate Risk Index is released by German Watch at COP30 in Brazil, which assess how the countries are being affected by climate-related extreme weather events over these past 3 decades. The CRI 2026 combines the long-term, that is 1995 to 2024, and short-term data of 2024, highlighting human and economic loss due to the climate-related disasters. The global findings of this particular report in the past 30 years, that is from 1995 to 2014, the extreme weather events. In fact, there were over 9,700 extreme weather events recorded globally. There are more than 8,32,000 deaths because of climate-related disasters. The economic loss includes more than 4.5 trillion US dollars. Heat waves and storms have caused the highest fatalities. In fact, heat waves include 33% of the disasters and storms include 33% of the disasters. Floods, which are of around 48% of the disasters, affected large number of people. The storms has caused highest economic losses of around 2.64 trillion US dollars, which is 58% of the total economic loss. The most affected countries in this particular 30 years are Dominica, Myanmar, Honduras, Libya, Haiti, Grenada, Philippines, Nicaragua, India, and Bahamas. In the top 10 affected countries, India is in the 9th place. And if you carefully observe, India, Philippines, and Myanmar are the only Asian countries in this particular list, whereas the other countries like Dominica, Haiti, Grenada, and Bahamas belong to Caribbean islands, and Nicaragua and Honduras belong to Central American countries, and the Libya belongs to a North African country. Hence, if you carefully observe this, they are only the global south countries. Hence, it can be concluded that all the global south countries are majorly affected because of the climate related disasters. There are two categories regarding the impacted countries. First is the highly unusual one-time extreme events. These have been occurred in Dominica, Myanmar, Honduras and Libya, and they are recurring extreme events which can be seen in Haiti, Philippines, Nicaragua and India. The climate science shows that human-induced climate change is converting these rare extreme events into a new normal. The inequality in this climate impact, that is, it affecting the global south, which is hit very hardest. In fact, the 8 out of the top 10 worst affected in 2024 were low income and lower middle income nations, and 6 out of top 10 in the past 30 years from 1995 to 2024 are lower middle income countries, including India. In fact, India in 2024 ranks 15th in the most affected countries. None of the top affected countries are from the high income group like USA, China, Russia, Japan. Hence, this highlights the weak coping capacity, poor infrastructure, and lower adaptation capabilities in global south. Coming to the India's position, the long-term ranking stands at 9th from the most affected nations globally. As previously discussed, 2024, India stands in the 15th position. 80,000 deaths occurred in India because of this particular disasters, which is around 9.6% of the global fatalities. 430 major extreme events occurred in these 30 years. India has seen an economic loss of around 170 billion US dollars. India has been facing recurring floods and landslides, severe heat waves with temperatures crossing over 50 degrees centigrade. We have also seen very powerful cyclones like Amphan, Hudhud, Odisha in 1999, Gujarat in 1998. Also, there are recurrent droughts that has been occurring in India. India's rank has slightly improved from the 2023 index, which indicates fewer extreme disasters and stronger resilience and disaster preparedness measures that are being taken by India. In fact, the human-induced climate change, it is increasing frequency, intensity and duration of extreme events that have been occurring. The climate change has worsened the El Nino linked disasters in 2024. In 2024, we have 41 additional dangerous heat days than the previous years. The summer of 2024 was the hottest on record with 2 billion people exposed to 30 plus dangerous heat days. The 2025 is among the top 3 warmest years ever recorded. The greenhouse gas concentrations and ocean heat content are being increased continuously. The 2015 to 2025 will be the 11 warmest years in 176-year history of the world. What is India's measures for this climate related disasters? In global level, India has led the Coalition for Disaster Resilient Infrastructure in 2019, the IRIS Initiative for Small Island Developing States. Infrastructure Resilience Accelerated Fund has been proposed by India at COP27. In fact, every $1 in the resilient infrastructure is equal to $4 in future losses. So what are the national measures? In India, we have NDMA guidelines, early warning systems, heat action plans, urban flood resilience projects, and coastal zone management. In fact, India has shown a deep improved resilience with its vast population, monsoon dependence, and long coastline, making it the most vulnerable nations in the world. We have already discussed that the global south is impacted due to these lower coping capabilities, underlining the urgent need for enhanced adaptation efforts, resilient infrastructure, and robust climate financing. In fact, this report acts as a reminder that global mitigation, adaptation, and loss damage mechanisms must scale up to prevent any future impacts. That can be highlighted at COP30 in the ongoing session of the COP30. In fact, the International Court of Justice, it has reinforced that states have binding legal responsibilities to mitigate climate change, adapt to it, and support vulnerable nations via climate finance. These are the most important topics that has been in this particular week. Now let's discuss the previous year questions. Let's go into the first question. With reference to Tropical Forest Forever Facility Initiative, consider the following statements. Statement 1. It is a France-led global fund to reward tropical countries for protecting and expanding forests. It aims to mobilize around 125 billion US dollars through public and private investment using returns to pay nations that conserve forests. India has decided not to join the TFFF initiative. Let's go into the statement 1. As we have previously discussed with Tropical Forest Forever Facility that it is a Brazil-led global fund, not France. This is a Brazil-led global fund. It rewards the tropical countries for protecting and expanding forests. Hence, the statement 1 is wrong. It aims to mobilize 125 billion US dollars with 100 billion US dollars from governments and philanthropists and remaining 25 billion US dollars funded from the investments through public investments. These are invested in different places and the returns are used to pay the nations that conserve the forests. Hence, this statement is correct. India has decided not to join the TFFF initiative. In fact, India is highly interested to join the Tropical Forest Forever facilities, and right now India has been in the observer status. Hence, this statement is wrong. Hence, only one statement is correct. So, let's look at the next question. With reference to recent developments in science, which one of the following statements is not correct? Functional chromosomes can be created by joining segments of DNA taken from cells of different species. Statement B. Pieces of artificial functional DNA can be created in laboratories. Option C. A piece of DNA taken out from an animal cell can be made to replicate outside a living cell in a laboratory. Statement D. Cells taken out from plants and animals can be made to undergo cell division in laboratory petri dishes. Let's look at this statement option A. In fact, creating functional chromosomes by mixing DNA from different species was not scientifically validated in 2019, while artificial chromosomes like yeast artificial chromosomes, bacterial artificial chromosomes do exist, but they do not involve joining natural DNA segments from different species to make a fully functional chromosome. Hence, this particular statement is an incorrect statement. Option B. Synthetic biology allows construction of artificial DNA segments. Example, Craig Venter's team synthesized the mycoplasm genome. Hence, this particular statement is a correct statement. Option C. DNA replication can occur in vitro using PCR, that is polymerase chain reaction. PCR is exactly DNA replicated outside living cells. Hence, option C is correct. In a standard cell culture, cells are taken from plants and animals and made to undergo cell division. Hence, even this particular statement is correct. The third question. Which of the following diseases can be transmitted from one person to another through tattooing? Chikungunya, hepatitis B, HIV/AIDS. Select the correct answer using the codes given below. In fact, chikungunya does not transmit through tattooing from one person to another. It is usually transmitted by mosquito bites, but not transmitted through blood-to-blood exposure. Hence, it does not transmit through tattooing. Hepatitis B, it spreads through contaminated needles, blood, and bodily fluids. Hence, tattoo needles are to be sterilized before, else it helps in the transmission of hepatitis B. HIV/AIDS, it spreads via blood-to-blood contact, including contaminated needles. Hence, tattooing with these infected needles can transmit HIV. Hence, Both 2 and 3 are correct. Let's look at the next particular question. Consider the following statements. Statement 1. Giant stars live much longer than dwarf stars. Statement 2. Compared to dwarf stars, giant stars have a greater role of nuclear reactions. Which one of the following is correct in respect of the above statements? So let's look at the first statement. Giant stars live much longer than dwarf stars. In fact, giant stars are massive, burn their fuel very quickly, and therefore have a shorter lifespan, which is usually millions of years. Whereas dwarf stars, especially the red dwarfs, they burn fuel very slowly, hence lives up to billions of years, which are the longest living stars. Hence, statement 1 is an incorrect statement. In the statement 2, it is said that giant stars have greater rate of nuclear reactions, hence, which is correct statement. Yes, giant stars have much higher core temperatures and pressures, hence they have very faster nuclear fusion rates. Hence, this particular statement is correct. Hence, the statement 1 is incorrect and statement 2 is correct. Next, let's look at the next question. Which one of the following statements regarding Khangchendzonga National Park is or are correct? It has one of the highest altitudinal ranges of any protected area in the world. It contains one of the largest glaciers of Asia. It lies completely within Western Himalayas. Coming to the statements. First statement. Khangchendzonga National Park in Sikkim ranges from around 12,000 meters to 1200 meters to 8,586 meters, which is the peak of Khangchendzonga. Hence, it is one of the world's highest altitudinal ranges of any protected area. Hence, statement 1 is correct. The region of Khangchendzonga National Park contains Zemu Glacier, which is one of the largest glacier in Himalayas. In fact, it is one of the largest in Asia as well. Hence, this statement is correct. The Khangchendzonga National Park lies completely within the eastern Himalayas, but not the western Himalayas. Hence, this statement is wrong. Hence, only statements 1 and 2 are correct. Coming to the next mains question. Let's look at one of the mains question. What is disaster resilience? How is it determined? Describe various elements of the resilience framework. Also mention the global targets of Sendai framework for disaster risk reduction 2015 to 2030. How to start an answer? First, in introduction, define what is disaster resilience. In fact, you can also mention here its significance with ability to resist, absorb, adapt, and recover. In this context, even you can mention the increasing climate variability and intensifying disasters where resilience forms the cornerstone of sustainable risk reduction. Now, explain the different indicators or determinants like exposure to hazards, like the people, how are they exposed to various disaster prone zones like coastal settlements and the seismic belts. You can next explain the vulnerability through their social vulnerability, economic vulnerability, and environmental vulnerability. You can also discuss the coping capacity, which is the immediate ability to respond and survive during any disaster. The adaptive capacity, that is to adjust to practices, institutions, and systems to reduce the long-term risk. The preparedness and institutional strength, the quality of governance, coordination, the training, mock drills, and integration of disaster planning and development, the early warning system, community participation, and the social capital, that is the Panchayat Raj institutions and volunteer networks that can be explained in this particular indicators. In the next part of the body, you can explain and list the major elements. The major elements of a disaster resilience are risk assessment and its mapping, prevention and mitigation measures like the structural measures and the non-structural measures, the preparedness and planning, the early warning and communication systems, which include integrated multi-hazard early warning system disseminated via SMS, mobile apps, community radios, and ensuring the last mile connectivity. You can also mention about the responsive mechanisms, which of the rapid deployment of NDRF or SDRF, the recovery and rehabilitation, governance and institutional strengthening, capacity development, and community empowerment. In the question, they have also asked about the global targets of Sendai framework for disaster risk reduction. There are 7 targets. So what are those 7 targets? The substantial reduction in global disaster mortality by 2030, substantial reduction in the number of affected people globally, reduction in direct disaster economic loss in relation to global GDP, reduction in damage to critical infrastructure and disruption of basic services, increase in number of countries with national and local strategies by 2020 and strengthen them by 2030, enhance international cooperation to develop countries for technology, increase availability and access to multi-hazard early warning systems. Then you can conclude this answer by stating the importance of resilience in the era of climate change, which requires localized capacities, risk-informed governance, technology-enabled early warning systems, and strong community institutions. And also, don't forget to mention the philosophy of build back and better, which guides recovery and reconstruction so that the future risks are reduced and not recreated. Ultimately, resilience is a continuous process which can integrate preparedness, adaptation, and inclusive governance. Try to write your own answers and send them to response@civiccentre.in for CivicCentre IAS Master's valuable feedback. Only when you write your answers and send, you can develop yourself. The first step in answer writing is start writing your answers. Thank you for listening to the episode. Like and share, subscribe the videos. Further updates.
CivicCentre IAS is offering Telangana Group 1 Prelims cum Mains classes as well as Andhra Pradesh Group 1 Prelims cum Mains classes in English medium for a period of 8 to 10 months. This also covers the complete NCERT textbooks and statewide textbooks. So, what are you waiting for? Learn through reverse engineering technique today. Admissions are in progress. Join now. Visit our website. Thank you.